The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting a golden hue over the quiet suburban neighborhood. The birds chirped their final notes of the day, and a soft breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. Inside the modest garage of a time-worn single-story house, James knelt beside the battered blue Chevy Caprice he'd been trying to revive for weeks. The hood stood propped up like a tired soldier, revealing an engine that looked just as exhausted as its owner. James, in his late 30s, had grease smeared up to his elbows and dark oil stains on his already faded jeans. His flannel shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, and sweat trickled from his brow, tracing a line down his cheek before falling to the cold cement below. The socket wrench in his hand slipped again, making him grunt in frustration. He wiped his brow with the back of his arm, leaving a black smudge across his forehead. This car wasn't just transportation, it was a lifeline. His interview on Monday was at a warehouse an hour away, and with no public transport and no friends nearby to rely on, this car had to run. He had been working double shifts at the auto shop for months just to keep the lights on and put food on the table for his daughter Lily. The bills were piling up, the fridge was never quite full, and his heart often felt like it carried the weight of the world. But this job interview could change everything. A steady paycheck, benefits, a real shot at stability. James leaned in closer to inspect a stubborn bolt when he suddenly heard it, a soft patter, like hurried footsteps on concrete. Then a small, breathless voice pierced the mechanical buzz of his portable radio. "Dad." He looked up instinctively, his heart skipping a beat. Lily. She was running barefoot down the driveway in her pajamas, her curls bouncing wildly, her little arms flailing for balance. She held something crumpled in her tiny hands, a piece of paper perhaps, or maybe a drawing. Her eyes were wide, filled with an urgency far too big for someone her size. James stood up quickly, concerned. "Lily, what's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked, tossing the wrench onto the ground with a metallic clatter and wiping his hands on a nearby rag. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she ran straight into his arms and pressed her head into his chest. He crouched down, holding her gently but firmly. Her breathing was shallow, like she'd been crying or running or both. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper but heavy with disappointment, she said, "You forgot." James frowned. "Forgot what, baby?" She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes and held up the wrinkled flyer in her hand. "The father-daughter dance. It's tonight. You promised you'd come. You even signed this." Her voice cracked on the last word, and her bottom lip trembled as she pointed to a shaky signature in red ink. James' own, signed weeks ago. James's stomach twisted. He remembered now. The flyer had come home stuffed in her backpack, and she had been so excited. She had picked out her outfit days in advance. She'd even made him practice dancing in the living room, and he had forgotten. Caught up in bills, tools, deadlines, and stress, he had let the moment slip through his fingers. I'm sorry, Lily," he stammered, brushing a curl from her forehead. "I was just trying to fix the car so I could get a better job for us. But I don't care about the job," she whispered, stepping back. "I just wanted to dance with you." Then she turned and ran toward the house, her shoulders shaking, the flyer floating to the garage floor like a forgotten dream. James stood frozen, guilt crashing over him in waves. The engine, the interview, the stress, all of it seemed so small now compared to the look in his daughter's eyes. He looked down at his grease-covered hands, then at the family photo taped to his toolbox. It was faded and bent at the corners, him, Lily, and her mother, Rachel, smiling in a time that now felt like another life. Rachel had passed away when Lily was just 2, and since then James had tried to be everything: mother, father, provider, protector. But in trying to fix everything, he had started breaking what mattered most. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the garage. "Not tonight," he said aloud to no one but himself. "I'm not messing this up tonight." And with that, the father who was always fixing machines began fixing something far more fragile: his daughter's heart. James stood at the edge of the garage for a moment, watching the screen door slowly sway shut behind Lily. The garage lights flickered, the dying bulb humming above like an exhausted reminder of how long he'd been out there. Everything around him suddenly felt too quiet, too heavy. He picked up the crumpled flyer she had dropped and smoothed it out on the hood of the car. The words "Father-Daughter Dance, Friday 6 p.m. stared back at him in colorful fonts meant to evoke joy. In the corner, Lily had drawn a stick-figure version of him next to her own, hearts floating between them, both wearing crowns. James swallowed hard. He walked inside the house, slowly, like a man entering a room filled with regrets. The hallway was dim. Her door was partially closed. He heard her small voice talking, maybe to her stuffed animals, maybe to herself. He knocked gently and pushed the door open. The nightlight cast a soft glow across her unicorn bedspread. Lily sat on the floor, still in her tutu, now holding her toy bunny, whispering into its ear. "Lily," he said softly. She didn't look at him. He came in and sat beside her. "Sweetheart, I messed up. I forgot, and that's on me." Lily finally turned, her eyes puffy but dry. "You always say you'll come, but then it's too much work, or the car broke, or maybe next time. There's always a reason." James lowered his gaze. Each word she said sliced into him like dull blades, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. "I know," he admitted. "I thought that by fixing everything else, I was doing right by you, but maybe I've been missing the most important part, you." She looked at him, expression softening just a little. "I want to be there," he continued. "Even if I'm late, even if I don't have a car, if you'll still let me." She bit her lip. "But how will we get there? It's already dark." And then something clicked in James's brain. Scene 3, a makeshift miracle. A spark lit behind James's eyes, the same kind of spark that had once helped him build a treehouse from scraps and fix a leaky pipe with bubblegum and a spoon. "You go get your shoes," he said, standing up with a sudden purpose. "Daddy's got an idea." Lily blinked. "Shoes? But we don't have a car. We've got the next best thing, the Daddy Express." 10 minutes later, neighbors peeked out from behind curtains and porches as James emerged down the driveway, pulling Lily in an old red wagon that had seen better days. But now it was something else entirely. He had wrapped the sides in shiny gift ribbon from a forgotten birthday drawer, added string lights powered by a battery pack, and laid a pillow inside so Lily could sit like a princess. He had even tucked one of Rachel's old scarves around Lily's shoulders, tied like a cape. Lily's giggles echoed through the neighborhood as James, slightly out of breath but smiling wider than he had in weeks, tugged the wagon toward the school. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoes didn't match, and his hair was still streaked with engine grease, but to Lily, he looked like a king. At the end of the block, a minivan slowed beside them. The driver, Miss Ellison, a kind-eyed mother from Lily's school, rolled down her window. "James, are you pulling her all the way to the school?" she asked with an amused smile. James nodded, panting slightly. That was the plan. "Well," she laughed, "hop in. I'll give you both a ride. That's the most beautiful parade I've seen all week." Moments later, they were pulling up outside the school gymnasium. Music was thumping faintly inside. Balloons framed the entrance. Little girls in sparkly dresses twirled through the doors with their fathers at their sides. James and Lily stood at the curb. He straightened his shirt, took her hand, and knelt down. "You ready to dance, my little firecracker?" She nodded, smiling from ear to ear. "Only if you promise not to step on my feet." He chuckled. "No promises." They walked in, late, underdressed, a little winded. But to Lily, it felt like a grand entrance. And to James, it felt like the first right step he'd taken in a very long time. The gymnasium was filled with soft lights and the glow of paper lanterns hanging from the ceiling, casting warm shadows that danced along the walls. A disco ball spun slowly above the polished floor, scattering tiny reflections that glittered like magic in every corner. Laughter echoed across the hall. Fathers in button-down shirts clumsily twirled their daughters, some in cowboy boots, others in tiny tiaras and glitter shoes. James stood nervously at the entrance, feeling awkward in his worn sneakers and faintly stained shirt, but when Lily squeezed his hand, everything else faded. The moment she tugged him toward the dance floor, he forgot about the missed job call, the unpaid bills, the broken car, everything. All that mattered was this second, this music, and this little girl in his arms, who looked at him like he was still her hero. They started to dance, slowly at first, her feet barely lifting from the ground as James gently swayed with her. She rested her head on his shoulder, sighing deeply. For a while they didn't say anything, just moved. Then in a soft, trembling voice, she whispered, "I miss Mom more when you're not around." James froze slightly, not in shock but in realization. That sentence cracked something open inside him that had been held together by stress and stubbornness for far too long. He gently stopped dancing and knelt to her eye level again, cupping her small face in his calloused hands. "I know, baby. I miss her too. Every single day." Lily looked down. I don't want to lose you too." James felt like the air had been knocked from his lungs. His heart ached, not just for her words, but for the way she had carried that fear quietly, alone. "You're not going to lose me," he said, his voice thick. "Not ever. I might mess up, forget things, or even be late, but I'll always show up. You hear me?" She nodded, eyes filling with tears, and threw her arms around his neck. "You're the best dad in the world," she whispered into his ear. Unknown to either of them, just a few steps away, a teacher named Mrs. Landry had been watching the whole scene. She had seen the wagon arrival, the smile, the dance, the quiet talk on the floor. It had touched her deeply. After the dance, as James and Lily walked out into the cool night air, Mrs. Landry approached. "Excuse me, Mr. James Carter." She smiled. "James, I'm one of the coordinators for the new fatherhood mentorship program here at the school. We're looking for dads who show up, not the perfect ones, just the ones who care. I don't know if you're interested, but we could use someone like you." James blinked. "You saw all that?" She laughed gently. "We all did, but it wasn't what we saw. It's what we felt, and I think your daughter did too." He looked down at Lily, who was beaming proudly at his side. For the first time in what felt like years, James felt something deep inside him shift, like he was no longer just surviving, but starting to live again. Later that night, the house was quiet. Lily had fallen asleep with her arms wrapped around the toy bunny and the little paper flower James had made for her from a napkin at the dance. Her tiara sat crookedly on her nightstand, and her pink tutu was draped over the bedpost like a trophy from a magical evening. James stood in the doorway, watching her with a peaceful smile. The kind of smile that comes only after you've faced your worst fear and held on to what mattered most. He walked softly back into the garage, which still smelled of engine oil and old metal. The car sat there, untouched since earlier, the hood still propped, the engine still broken. He looked at it for a long moment, then lowered the hood slowly, gently, like tucking in an old friend. "Not tonight," he said quietly. He didn't need to fix the car tonight. Tonight, he had fixed something far more fragile and far more important. He turned off the light in the garage. Just as he reached the door, his phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from a number he didn't recognize. "Hi James, this is Mark from Atlas Distribution. We came across a picture from the school dance tonight. Someone tagged us. Honestly, anyone who puts together a fairy-lit wagon to get his daughter to a dance is exactly the kind of guy we want on our logistics team. If you're still looking for work, we'd love to talk." James listened twice, stunned. Lily's laughter from earlier echoed in his ears as he looked toward the dark street outside. Maybe the car didn't get fixed that night, but a promise was, a memory was made, and a little girl's heart was reminded that her father may not be perfect, but he would always, always show up.